As Roland's words echoed through the border town, the locals erupted in cheers that could rival a rock concert. They pledged to fight for their highness with a fervor that could light up the night sky. Meanwhile, in the halls of Changgu Castle, a gaggle of nobles gathered to mock Roland's decision. They chortled at the thought of their walls being nothing but mud and pebbles. The Duke cut in with a booming voice and turned his gaze to Petrov, the ambassador. Petrov was caught off guard, but he gathered his wits and began to speak. The Duke leaned in, eager to hear what the ambassador had to say. Petrov had originally planned to keep the ore monopoly by buying it at a measly 30% below market price. But to his surprise, Roland had a different plan up his sleeve. Roland was determined to expand their horizons by seeking new trade partners and offering the ore at a jaw-dropping 50% below market price. Roland also intended to manufacture his own iron tools. But that wasn't the end of it. The Duke's eyebrows rose with interest, and he urged Petrov to continue. Petrov had more to say. He believed that if the border town could successfully defend against the Month of the Demons, it would be a great victory for Changgu's stronghold. But he also predicted that Roland wouldn't be staying in the border town forever. With the fight for the throne decree only lasting 5 years, it was only a matter of time before the Changgu stronghold could take over the much more prosperous border town and expand its territory. With a wise nod, Petrov advised the Changgu stronghold to send aid to Roland and help him build up the town's defenses. After all, a strong border town would benefit them all in the end. The Duke couldn't help but grin, impressed by Petrov's insight. He nodded in agreement, but his expression soon darkened. He rose from his seat with a scowl, making it clear that he didn't care about the welfare of the border town. However, he made it abundantly clear that no one, not even the prince, should dare to lay a finger on his border town. The next day, Roland summoned Carter to see his latest invention. It was a steam engine, a marvel of engineering made possible with the help of Anna's deft hands. As an engineer himself, Roland was smitten with the fascinating machinery that sparked the first industrial revolution. But Carter was skeptical. He had his reservations about this strange new contraption. Roland just grinned mischievously and poured some water into the tank. Then, he asked Anna to heat it up. Within a few minutes, the water started to boil and the engine roared to life. The connecting rods started moving and the wheels began to turn. In mere seconds, it reached its maximum velocity. As they beheld the steam engine in action, both Anna and Carter were left stunned by its sheer power. Carter couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling it gave him. He knew it took 15 long years to train a knight, but this machine could be built in less than a week. It didn't need food, and it wasn't afraid of the cold, hunger, or even arrows, swords, and spears. Carter couldn't help but question himself. With a machine like this, is there even a need for a knight anymore? Roland was beyond thrilled with the steam engine. It was the missing piece he needed to make his next move. As night descended, he made his way back to his residence, only to find Nightingale sitting on his bed, holding the blueprint of the steam engine. She was in awe of Roland's intelligence in creating such a powerful machine. Roland couldn't help but wonder how Nightingale had managed to get her hands on the blueprint, as it had been locked away in his desk. But Nightingale's curiosity about the machine was palpable, so Roland began to explain its potential uses. He told her that it could move ores, drain water, and smelt iron. In short, it was useful in any task that required strength. Nightingale's mischievous grin widened as she said she will bring the steam engine blueprint back to the Witch Association. Before Roland could even respond, Nightingale swiftly tucked the blueprints into her shirt and in exchange pulled out a secret letter delivered by a pigeon. However, she was able to intercept it. As Roland's eyes darted across the letter's contents, his emotions morphed from shock to a sense of utter betrayal. The words on the parchment were like a slap to his face. Roland's maid, Tyre, had received a sinister letter that instructed her to eliminate Roland during the dreaded months of the demon. This was not Tyre's first attempt, and the letter made it clear that failure again was not an option. Roland furrowed his brows as he tried to remember more about Tyre. He recalled that the previous fourth prince had a peculiar penchant for slapping Tyre's cakes, Nightingale, suggesting that the letter could be from one of his siblings. Wondered if Roland needed her help. Roland let out a deep sigh and asked Nightingale to get to the bottom of the matter. Nightingale, in turn, stood up, raised her hand, and vowed, then asked the blueprint to be her reward. The next morning, Carter burst into Roland's office, looking pale and flustered. He delivered the grim news that Tyre, Roland's trusted maid, had died the previous night. She had apparently fallen from the balcony of her room, and there were no signs of struggle or forced entry. Carter suggested it might have been a tragic accident. Roland told Carter to have the head maid arrange for the funeral, then turned his head to talk to an imaginary figure beside him. Suddenly, a thick fog materialized in front of him. As the mist cleared, a hooded figure emerged. She looked visibly upset and informed Roland that she had failed to obtain any information from Tyre. She dropped the bombshell that Tyre had taken her own life with the poison hidden within her teeth upon seeing Nightingale's appearance. Roland was taken aback by the revelation. He had never expected Tyre to resort to such a drastic measure. As Nightingale searched through Tyre's room, she was surprised to find a family letter addressed to Tyre. Although she couldn't decipher its contents, she couldn't shake off the feeling that it held a crucial clue. The letter addressed Tyre as Big Sister, and made repeated mentions of the sea. Nightingale knew that Roland's two brothers were located inland and would not have access to the ocean. This realization made her suspect that the letter could be linked to the third princess. Roland's mind raced as he tried to connect the dots. He knew that the third princess had always harbored a grudge against him. Was not beyond the realm of possibility that she had taken Tyre's family hostage and forced her to commit the heinous act of assassination. It doesn't matter if Roland wants to fight for the throne or not, these things are likely to keep happening in the future. Roland's line of thought was quickly interrupted by the hot air breathing onto his ears, as Nightingale whispered that someone is here, then she vanished into a mist of fog. As Barav entered the room, a worrying expression appeared on his face as he delivered the news to Roland. He carefully selected individuals who had volunteered to fight during the months of demons, had finally passed the rigorous filtering process, and were ready to be examined. Roland was overjoyed to hear this news, and he eagerly prepared to examine the volunteers. Before they left the office, Barav posed a crucial question to Roland. Was he sure about taking these people to defend the border town? Roland didn't quite understand the implication of this question until he laid his eyes on the ragtag group of volunteers before him. It was clear that they were not seasoned warriors, but rather, they were ordinary folk who had answered Roland's call to arms. Some of them were emaciated and weak, and it was evident that they had not had proper meals in days. Roland's mind raced as he surveyed the group of volunteers before him. He couldn't help but be reminded of the stark reality of this world. The productivity was abysmally low, and many ordinary people struggled to even put food on the table, let alone maintain a strong physique. Upon seeing the worrying look on Roland's face, Barav recommended hiring professional mercenaries instead. With no hesitation, Roland declined. He insisted to use the residence. Roland gazed out at the sea of people gathered in front of him, feeling a surge of excitement and determination. He knew that if he was going to build a strong military, it had to start with the people themselves. And that meant instilling in them the discipline, endurance, and strength needed to defend their kingdom against any threat. As he looked down at the people, Roland knew that training them to wield swords wasn't enough. They needed to be strong, agile, and disciplined, with the ability to work together as a team. So he told Carter to get them into formation and start running. As the sun reached its zenith, Roland, Barav, Carter, and Axe marched in front of the assembled residents. Carter furrowed his brow, unable to comprehend why Roland was subjecting the men to hours of mindless standing. Roland went as far as rewarding them with a precious egg for the simple task. Carter, however, remained skeptical. Clearly, Carter doesn't understand that simple posture was a crucial component of modern military training. Roland waved his hand and told Carter to continue to train the men the same way until he received the finalized training routine. Roland was no fool. He knew that transforming his ragtag group of men into Spartan warriors in a mere 2 months was a pipe dream. But that didn't mean he couldn't instill a sense of discipline and unwavering obedience in his troops. To Roland, there was nothing more crucial than the ability to follow orders without question. Individual strength was important, of course, but it paled in comparison to the power of a united military. As the cart full of tantalizing food and the coveted extra egg came into view, the crowd erupted into a frenzy of anticipation. Like a swarm of locusts, they surged forward, eager to claim their share. But Roland was not about to let chaos reign. With a commanding voice, he demanded that the people form 4 orderly lines and approach the cart one by one. Anyone who dared to break the rules would be unceremoniously shoved to the back of the line. To the amazement of all, the unruly crowd fell into line with surprising ease. Within minutes, they were neatly arranged into 4 orderly queues, their eyes glued to the food that lay just ahead. After a hearty lunch, Roland gave the order for his men to rest and then set off for the camp where the patrolling soldiers were stationed. He put Axe in charge, assigning him the task of teaching the troops how to set up a proper tent. Carter was concerned about Axe's background. After all, he hailed from the Sand Nation, far from the shores of Grey Castle. But Roland had made it clear that loyalty and merit were the only things that mattered. To him, everyone was his people, regardless of where they came from. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, Roland sat back and surveyed his handiwork. Before he lay the final training plans, a carefully crafted blueprint for turning his ragtag band of men into a disciplined fighting force. 2 things stood out to Carter as he pored over the document. Every day at noon, the men were to run around the border town until sunset. If they succeeded, they would earn an extra egg at their next meal. And after dinner, they were to attend Carl's Academy for education and training. Carter was puzzled by this last requirement, but Roland simply yawned and explained that a strong army couldn't simply be good at fighting. They needed to be civilized and educated. The following afternoon, Roland trudged wearily towards his office. As he pushed open the door, he was greeted by Nightingale, who looked genuinely concerned about his well-being. But before he could even say a word, she pointed towards the breakfast spread on the table, announcing that she had already eaten half of it while it was still piping hot. Roland couldn't help but chuckle at her impish grin. "Has no one taught you about respecting royalty?" he quipped, recalling how seriously Nightingale had taken etiquette the first time they had met. Without missing a beat, Nightingale stood up and presented him with a proper bow. But she knew that Roland didn't really care about such tedious formalities. Roland was almost taken aback by how well Nightingale seemed to understand him. Roland let out a weary sigh, his gaze shifting from the plate of half-eaten breakfast to Nightingale's eager expression. "If you are hungry, then eat all of it. I can always ask the kitchen to prepare something else." Nightingale's eyes lit up at the mention of food, and she eagerly picked up the remaining bits of toast and eggs. As she munched on the food, she couldn't help but ask, "What's with all the ice on you looking to purchase?" She thought Roland is looking to make some cold beverages. Roland's lips twitched into a mischievous smile as he glanced at the note lying open on the table and told Nightingale that he has plans to make iced cheese. Nightingale's eyes widened in excitement at the mention of a new culinary adventure. Roland's thoughts raced as he considered his next move. Although he knew that Nightingale was not his enemy, he couldn't fully trust her yet. With so little information about her, he couldn't reveal everything he knew. He continued working on his draft for the next project, firearms. Unlike the steam engine, firearms didn't require as much technological understanding, but they could still be incredibly dangerous in the wrong hands. Roland knew that he couldn't afford to have the manufacturing methods leaked. Roland was taken aback by his latest discovery, one that left him both fascinated and apprehensive. It appeared that the nobles had been using niter, a crucial component in the production of gunpowder, to cool their beverages. And to make matters worse, they had given it the absurdly elegant name of S01. Roland turned his head towards Nightingale, his curiosity piqued by the mention of the Witch Association. With a tentative voice, he asked if the association also trained assassins, wondering if there was more to Nightingale's past than she had let on. As soon as he mentioned the association, Nightingale's expression turned melancholic, and she lowered her voice, telling Roland that they were a pitiful group of people who had come together out of necessity. She had joined them 2 years ago, seeking refuge and a place to belong. Roland's next question was one he had been hesitant to ask, but he couldn't help but wonder if Nightingale had worked for anyone else before him. He questioned if others were willing to take in witches like her. Nightingale's mood shifted, and she grew quieter, her eyes downcast as she spoke. She mentioned that she would have been killed if she hadn't been useful, but didn't elaborate further. Roland urged her to continue. Nightingale let out a nervous smile, her discomfort palpable. She didn't want to talk about her past but assured Roland that she hadn't worked for anyone in the last 5 years and understood his concerns. Roland couldn't shake off the feeling that there was more to her story, but for now, he let it be. After 5 long days of hard work, Roland finally completed the first flintlock. The firearm was a true marvel of engineering, but he knew that the real challenge lay ahead. He intended to use his steam engine to mass-produce the parts and barrels needed for the guns, but it soon became apparent that the machine was not quite up to the task. Everything else still had to be made by hand, which slowed down the production process considerably. With his mind racing, he calculated that he could only produce 4 flintlocks at the current rate before the month of the demons. As Roland proudly presented his latest invention, Carter's eyes widened with curiosity. He couldn't help but marvel at the weapon's strange and unfamiliar appearance, wondering how it could possibly stand up against the monstrous demons. Roland's answer was simple yet surprising. He planned to handpick the most skilled hunters in the border town and form them into a specialized squad, whose primary weapon would be the flintlocks. At the mention of hunters, Carter's brow furrowed in confusion. "Why hunters and not the patrol squad?" he asked. Roland hesitated for a moment, memories of the patrol squad's recent struggles flashing through his mind. But he was unsure if they had what it takes to wield his new invention effectively. Later that night, as the patrol squad member, Brian struggled to fight for his life against the enemy in the dark and filthy sewer beneath Roland's castle. The clanging of swords echoed in the narrow tunnel as he fought against the scar-faced assailant, who threatened him with the same fate as his former squadmate, Grey Dog. Despite the danger, Brian was determined not to let the enemy enter the castle and harm his town. With a burst of strength, he disarmed the scar-faced attacker and thrust his sword into his chest, leaving the enemy stunned at the fact that he had been defeated by a mere patrol squad member. Brian sneered in defiance, reminding the enemy that while they wasted their time drinking and gambling in the bars, he and Grey Dog were training hard to protect their town. He will not let these people who were sent by the Changu stronghold cause disaster in the border town. Brian charged forward, but just as he was about to strike the final blow, another enemy emerged from the shadows and plunged a dagger into Brian's body, causing him to collapse in pain. With each passing moment, the situation in the sewer grew direr. Patrol after patrol arrived, drawn by the sounds of the scuffle until a small army had amassed. Despite the excruciating pain coursing through his body, Brian knew he had to act quickly. With a shuddering breath, he yanked the dagger from his wound and hurled it towards the nearest torch. The sewer was plunged into darkness in an instant, the only sound the hiss of extinguished flames and the panicked shouts of the patrols. Brian stumbled back to the granary, his body racked with pain from the dagger wound. He knew that this was the place the enemy was targeting, and without the precious supply stored here, the border town would be left with no choice but to flee to Changji's stronghold. Roland had given them so much hope and progress, and Brian was determined to protect it all. Suddenly, the door to the granary was kicked open with a deafening crash. Brian was seized by his collar and flung to the ground, resigned to his fate. But just as the intruders closed in for the kill, Nightingale descended from the rafters with a wicked grin. In a blur of movement, she dispatched the attackers with ease, leaving them lying motionless on the ground. The morning sun cast a somber light on the granary, where Carter was surveying the aftermath of the brutal attack. 8 corpses lay scattered about the room, 7 of which belonged to former members of the border town's patrol squad. The last was an unknown assailant. In Roland's office, the young prince seethed with anger over the brazen invasion of his castle. He turned to Nightingale and thanked her for her timely intervention. Without her warning, he might have been among the dead. The skilled witch smiled wryly, assuring him that even without her, the intruders would have been no match for Anna. Roland's anger gave way to a wry grin as he offered Nightingale a position as his personal shadow guard, promising a generous salary of 2 gold royals per month, and other great benefits. Nightingale wavered, her heart torn between loyalty to her fellow sisters in the Witch Association and the promise of a new life free from persecution. Despite her hesitation, she stood firm and refused to abandon her comrades. Roland, impressed by Nightingale's unwavering commitment, extended a generous offer. He implored her to gather her sisters and bring them to the border town, where he was overseeing a complete reconstruction of the community. With his watchful eye and a steady hand, Roland vowed to provide a safe haven where the witches could roam the streets without fear of discrimination. Nightingale was deeply touched by Roland's unwavering compassion, yet she remained skeptical of his abilities. She insisted that she needed to witness Roland's success firsthand before entrusting him with the task at hand. Roland, undeterred by his initial failure to recruit Nightingale, was even more determined to achieve his goals. Roland inquired whether Nightingale had successfully escorted Manhwa to safety. As it turned out, Manhwa had been assigned to treat a man covered in blood, a task that had left her shaken and afraid. Roland probed further, seeking Nightingale's perspective on the incident. After carefully considering the details of the event, Nightingale advised Roland that it was unlikely to be connected to his siblings. She believed it to be the work of an amateur schemer, unlike the skilled and cunning maid Tyre. 2 suspects had been captured alive, and Nightingale reassured Roland that he would soon have the answers he sought. As she spoke, Nightingale casually picked up the teacup from the table and took a sip, her demeanor calm and composed despite the gravity of the situation. Her words were measured and confident, reassuring Roland that she had a firm grasp of the situation. As the noon sun shone down on them, Carter and Roland made their way toward a small, nondescript room. Roland pushed open the door to reveal a man swathed in bandages, his face and body hidden from view. As soon as he saw Roland, the man tried to rise, his movements agitated and uneasy. With a gentle nod, Roland urged the man to relax, assuring him that he already knew the truth about what had happened. He praised Brian for his bravery and selflessness, calling him a true hero. Brian's face crumpled as he recalled his fallen comrade, tears streaming down his face and his body shaking with emotion. Roland reached out to comfort Brian, his hand settling gently on the brave man's shoulder. He promised that Brian's friend would receive a burial befitting his courage and sacrifice. But then, Roland delivered the news that the scar-faced culprit had been sentenced to death by hanging, inviting Brian to attend the execution in 3 days. But Brian hesitated, his expression pained and uncertain. He spoke of the scar-faced man's noble status and the fact that nobles could often use their wealth to atone for their crimes. He is afraid that killing Scar-Face may anger other nobles from the Chengdu stronghold. With a resolute tone, Roland asserted that the scar-faced man may be distantly related to a noble family, but he held no title or land to speak of. Furthermore, he had attempted to invade a prince's castle and burn their food supplies, putting the lives of over 2,000 residents of the border town in peril. Such crimes were unforgivable and warranted the harshest of punishments, death by hanging. As he spoke, Roland's eyes gleamed with steely determination, his conviction unshakable. He turned to Brian, his voice softening as he urged the brave man to rest and recover from the trauma of the recent events. Roland promised that a proper conferring ceremony will be organized for him once the month of the demon had passed. Brian's eyes widened in shock and amazement upon hearing of the conferring ceremony, his gaze fixed upon Roland's unwavering expression. Roland met his gaze with a firm resolve, letting the weight of his words sink in as he spoke. With a steady voice, Roland informed Brian that the Brave Patrol would henceforth become his personal knights, entrusted with the sacred duty of defending the border town and its people. At the city wall, Axe, with his imposing presence, commanded the daily training of the border town's soldiers. His voice boomed loud and clear, echoing across the training ground, as he barked out orders for the men to stand at attention. With a swift and practiced movement, the soldiers aligned themselves in perfect formation, their spears at the ready. As the fourth prince approached, Roland descended the stairs with a sense of trepidation, uncertain of what to say to these men who stood before him. His mind raced with questions, pondering over the best course of action. With a deep breath, Roland stepped forward and chose a young blonde soldier addressing the soldiers with a clear and commanding voice. With a radiant grin, the illustrious figure inquired about the well-being of the young lad. From his past experience gleaned from the news, he knew the expected response. Not tired and doing well. However, to his amazement, the youngster unexpectedly collapsed and kneeled to the ground, tears streaming down his face. The boy was so overjoyed that he was at a loss for words. The other soldiers in the vicinity were awestruck to witness the Royal Highness himself descending to observe their training, overwhelmed with a sense of pride and admiration. Roland extended his hand towards the youthful soldier, imparting a message to him that kneeling was not necessary for his presence. With a beaming grin, the lad complied, rising to his feet with unbridled enthusiasm. Roland was elated to observe the strides they had made in their training regiment, as evidenced by their elevated energy levels, attributable to proper nutrition and rest. Turning his attention to the young soldier, Roland inquired if he had any novel ideas or suggestions that could further enhance their training, emphasizing that he was always open to hearing feedback. The young soldier hesitated momentarily, understandably apprehensive about conversing with the fourth prince. After taking a deep breath, he mustered the courage to speak his mind, stating that their forces were insufficient in number. In the event of a demonic beast assault, they were only capable of defending a mere third of the wall. The murmurs of agreement from the surrounding soldiers served as a testament to the veracity of his words. Roland raised his hand to quell the cacophony of voices, signaling for everyone to quiet down. Turning his attention back to the young lad, he asked for his name, to which he learned that the soldier's name was Vanner. Roland expressed his admiration for Vanner's keen observation skills and concurred with his opinion regarding the inadequacy of their forces. Axe, who was nearby, affirmed Roland's statement by noting that demonic beasts lacked the intelligence to organize and were akin to wild beasts. Having established the veracity of Vanner's concerns, Roland unveiled his plan. Given that the wall spanned an impressive 600 meters, they would divide their forces into 3 groups, with obstacles set up in between each group. The obstacles would compel the beasts to run around them and concentrate in specific areas, where the soldiers would be lying in wait for them. Axe voiced his trepidation regarding the proposed plan, citing the inherent risks of engaging with only spears and arrows. Roland, however, appeared unperturbed, and with a sly grin, he began to divulge a new and secret weapon. In the distance, not far from the city wall, a massive explosion erupted from a nearby forest, sending flames soaring into the air and causing the ground to tremble. Dust and pebbles rained down upon them as Roland reveled in his excitement, anticipating the success of the new weapon. Carter and Axe were awestruck, unable to comprehend the sheer magnitude of the weapon's power, likening it to the thunder of the gods themselves. As Roland approached the massive dent in the ground, measuring half a meter in depth and 10 meters in width, he couldn't help but feel exhilarated at the sight of the explosive power of gunpowder, which seemed to be the best friend for all Ice Sky protagonists. Nearby, the unfortunate bunnies that had been tied up near the explosion site, their body cold and unmoving. Axe, visibly thrilled by the newfound power of the weapon, eagerly inquired if they could be mass-produced. Roland let out a sigh, acknowledging the harsh reality that it wouldn't be possible by the time the month of Demon arrived. However, he remained optimistic, predicting that they would have amassed a stockpile of 20 to 30 such weapons by then, which he was confident would suffice to see them through the ordeal. From Nightingale's unique perspective, the world appeared to be nothing but shades of black and white, a concept that may be hard for others to comprehend. However, this allowed her to break free from the mundane constraints of everyday life and move about freely. Within the mist, cardinal directions were mere abstract notions that held no bearing on her movements. Instead, she followed the ever-shifting lines that guided her path, enabling her to float effortlessly through walls and solid objects. Nightingale's ability to perceive the world differently also allowed her to see the intricate flow and ebb of magical power within witches. With a keen eye, she could discern the strength and brightness of Anna's magical core, which radiated with a powerful aura that impressed even Nightingale. To Nightingale's astonishment, Anna was not only aware of her existence but greeted her with open arms. Emerging from the mist, Nightingale revealed herself with a smile. Anna was practicing her abilities in her pajamas and was delighted to see Nightingale. With a bright grin, Nightingale invited Anna to share some of her delicious fish cakes. Nightingale advised Anna to wash her hands before eating, but Anna simply used her flames to purify her hands, leaving Nightingale in awe of her precise control over fire. However, Nightingale knew that the more powerful an ability, the more pain one must endure during demonic torture. As Anna savored the delectable fish cake, Nightingale couldn't help but express her concern for the young girl's safety. With a worried expression etched on her face, she delicately broached the subject of Anna's future. She questioned whether Anna truly wished to remain in the border town, cautioning that many dangers were lurking in the harsh winter months ahead. Nightingale implored Anna to consider the comfort and safety of the Witch Association, where she could be surrounded by like-minded individuals who would welcome her with open arms. Anna didn't respond to Nightingale's inquiry directly, but instead, she posed a question of her own, Where did Nightingale hail from before joining the association? Nightingale's response was that she lived in a bustling metropolis in the east, not too far from the capital. However, Anna didn't stop there and inquired whether Nightingale was happy in her previous life. At the mention of her past, a jolt of memory coursed through Nightingale's mind. She recalled being confined in chains, treated no differently than a lowly animal. The pain she endured caused her to shiver uncontrollably as she wondered what prompted Anna to ask such a loaded question. Anna proceeded to recount her own harrowing tale, where she was sold to the church by her own father for a paltry sum of 25 gold royals. Overcoming her trepidation, Anna gently placed her hands atop Nightingale's and shared how Roland had come to her rescue, freeing her from the confines of her bleak existence. The mere thought of her new life here filled Anna with an inexplicable sense of happiness. As Nightingale listened in awe, Nightingale went on explaining that despite what Anna thought, she is still trapped in this castle, and the rest of the populace still harbored an abhorrent disdain for witches. However, Anna's unwavering faith in Roland's vision for change surpassed any fears or misgivings she may have harbored. Fixing her crystalline gaze directly upon Nightingale's, Anna posed a poignant question: where did Nightingale find more fulfillment, in the Witch Association or here? Without missing a beat, Anna professed her own sense of spiritual home in this very border town where she now resided, alongside her unwavering trust in Roland's promise of bringing transformative change to this land. If the holy mountain that the witches dreamed of was Nightingale's peaceful home, Anna believed that she had found her own holy mountain right here, in the company of Roland and the inhabitants of this humble town. Just as Nightingale was about to reply, the door suddenly flung open with a thunderous crash. In walked Manhwa, tears streaming down her ashen face. With wild desperation in her eyes, she flung herself upon Anna, her body trembling with fear. In a frantic and nervous tone, Manhwa begged for Anna's assistance, her words spilling out in an incomprehensible rush. Meanwhile, in Roland's chambers, he was in the midst of a delightful dream, surrounded by his bewitching harem. Suddenly, his reverie was rudely interrupted by Nightingale, who yanked him unceremoniously out of bed. Her face twisted with anger, Nightingale relayed the alarming news that Manhwa's father had arrived and now knew of his daughter's true nature as a witch. Roland was stunned by this revelation, his mind racing with countless questions. He scrambled to get dressed and made his way down to the meeting room. As he entered, he was confronted by a white-haired man with bulging veins popping out of his face. The man demanded the return of his daughter, his voice laced with a venomous fury. Manhwa cowered before the white-haired man, who ranted and raved that his daughter was not a witch and that accusations were nothing but nonsense. Roland and Anna exchanged a meaningful look, silently acknowledging that they were on the same page. Suddenly, a bright spark of flame ignited in Anna's palm, causing the man to recoil in shock and fear. As the flames grew more intense, Manhwa's tears flowed freely as she begged Anna to stop. The white-haired man was at a loss for words, his anger turning to confusion as he demanded to know what was happening. With a friendly smile, Roland stepped forward and urged the man to calm down. He explained that there had been a misunderstanding and suggested that they have a real talk to clear things up. Gradually, the white-haired man's anger dissipated as Roland patiently explained that Manhwa had come to the castle to train her magical abilities, not because he was into lowly. Roland's words hung in the air as he explained the precious value of Manhwa's healing abilities. He implored Manhwa's father to allow her to stay in the border town to assist in the upcoming battle against the demons, but the man shook his head firmly. Apologizing for his refusal, he explained that he could not bear to put his daughter in such grave danger. Roland persisted, reminding the man of Manhwa's grandfather, a valiant knight who had passed down his title to Manhwa's father. As he spoke of her grandfather's courageous exploits leading troops against the demonic beasts, Manhwa's father's demeanor shifted. His eyes lit up with pride and reverence as he eagerly recounted his father's heroic past. As Roland took notice of Manhwa's father's unconventional attire, he couldn't help but notice the rough calluses on his hands, evidence that he hadn't been idle like most of the other nobles. Roland's keen eye for detail allowed him to deduce that Manhwa's father has not forgotten about his father's legacy. As the conversation continued, Roland spoke of the Pine family's current struggles under the iron grip of Duke Ryan's tyranny. Despite their former glory, they now faced immense difficulty in reclaiming their rightful place in society. Manhwa's father was taken aback by Roland's accurate assessment of the situation, rendered speechless by the young lord's astuteness. With a sudden spark of inspiration, Roland invited Manhwa's father to stay in Bordertown and lend his strength to the fight against the demonic beasts that terrorized the surrounding lands. In return, Roland promised to reward him with a valuable piece of land. Manhwa's father rose from his seat, his expression filled with a mixture of determination and fear. While he was eager to join Roland's cause, his concerns for his daughter's safety still weighed heavily on his mind. His skeptical nature left him questioning whether Bordertown truly possessed the power and strength to fend off the relentless hordes of demonic beasts. Manhwa's father trembled with fear as Roland laid out the harsh reality of their situation. He spoke of the looming threat of the church and their insidious spies, who had infiltrated every corner of Changji's stronghold. Should they discover Manhwa's closely guarded secret, their fate would be sealed, with no hope of escape or salvation. Roland's words hung heavy in the air, each syllable laden with the weight of impending doom. He assured Manhwa's father that he had a plan, one that would ensure the safety of his beloved daughter. With steely determination, Roland vowed to have a boat ready at the dock, standing at the ready once their mission failed. Manhwa and Anna would be the first to depart. As Manhwa's father listened to Roland's proposal, he was struck by a feeling of unease. Yet he could sense something different about the notorious fourth prince, something that set him apart from the other nobles and royals he had encountered in his life. Taking a deep breath, he made the difficult decision to place his trust in Roland, hoping against hope that his faith would not be misplaced. With a change of tone, he vowed as a knight and swore to fight by Roland's side. Moments later, after saying farewell to Manhwa and her father, Anna pouted and asked why Roland will say that. With a determined voice, she claimed that she will be going nowhere. In Roland's office, Barav burst through the door, his face wrought with anxiety. He delivered the grave news that the ongoing training of their soldiers and the production of weapons had taken a substantial toll on their finances. If they continued on this path, they would surely run out of funds long before the months of the demon came to a close. Roland rubbed his temples wearily, acutely aware of the dire situation that faced them. With a heavy heart, he instructed Barav to draw the necessary funds from his own coffers. Barav remained unconvinced, his concern for Roland's safety palpable. Yet Roland remained resolute, determined to see his plans through to the end, no matter the cost. He assured Barav that he would be the first to leave should their mission fail, and urged him to attend to his duties with renewed focus and vigor. As Barav departed, Roland slumped onto his desk, overcome with a sense of despair. He couldn't believe that he had managed to drain his resources completely. In the midst of the fog, Nightingale appeared, materializing from the swirling mist. She leaned against Roland's desk, a mischievous grin on her face as she questioned his earlier words to Barav. Roland could feel his cheeks flush with embarrassment. Nightingale's eyes brimming with concern for Anna's well-being. She urged Roland to spend more time with her, fearful that her time may be running out. Yet Roland remained steadfast in his belief that Anna would emerge victorious against the demonic forces and trusted in Anna's own words that she will not prevail against the demonic torture and will surely survive. Nightingale couldn't believe Roland's unwavering trust in a witch as she continued to say a witch who had been cursed by the devil. Roland met her gaze evenly, a determined glint in his eyes. He refused to be swayed by her words, declaring that he trusted Anna just as much as he trusted Nightingale herself. The room fell into an awkward silence as Nightingale struggled to come to terms with Roland's unwavering words. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, unable to meet his gaze. As the weight of Roland's conviction began to sink in, Nightingale felt a faint blush creeping up her cheeks. She cleared her throat and stammered out a few words, as if she was a lie detector, admitting that Roland isn't lying. As the tension in the room dissipated, Nightingale found herself drawn to Roland's window. She peered out into the darkening sky, watching as snowflakes began to drift lazily down from the heavens. Her heart quickened with a sense of foreboding as she realized that this was the first snowfall, signaling the month of demons is arriving. Her eyes darted back to Roland, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Without a word, they both knew what needed to be done. As Roland approached the training field, the sound of gunfire echoed through the crisp winter air. Axe stood at the shooting range, his eyes locked onto the target in front of him. Roland approached him with a stern expression, eager to assess his progress. Axe turned to face Roland, his face breaking into a confident grin. With a nod of his head, he assured Roland that he had been practicing diligently and had mastered the flintlock as per his instructions. As Axe gazed down at the powerful weapon in his hand, he felt a deep sense of respect for the man who had given it to him. He vowed to never disappoint Roland and to use his skills to defend their land against the demonic beasts that threatened to overrun them. Roland turned to Carter and inquired about his progress. Though Carter's skill with the new weapons was commendable, his concerns about their slow production rate were valid. Roland acknowledged the difficulty of pioneering the age of fire weapons but reassured Carter that more weapons would be crafted in due time. Roland strode purposefully to the city wall, flanked by Axe and Carter, two of his most trusted soldiers. As he gazed out over the expanse of land beyond the wall, his mind was consumed with thoughts of the impending demon invasion. The trio arrived at the city wall, where Roland was greeted with a chorus of bowed heads from the assembled soldiers. As Axe reported that no demonic beasts had been sighted yet, Roland breathed a sigh of relief. The first snowfall usually meant a lull in activity from the beasts. However, their respite was short-lived when a soldier on the wall shouted a warning. A lone figure had appeared. Panic spread among the soldiers, and some suggested sounding the alarm. Roland, calm and collected, reminded them of their training and urged them to use proper judgments. Gradually, the men regained their composure and lowered their bows. Roland exhaled a weary breath, acknowledging the grueling drill was necessary to instill discipline in his troops. The soldiers stood in unison, intently watching as the cunning fox crept closer to the fortress walls. Suddenly, the beast leaped forward, its eyes fixed on the towering barrier. Axe, quick to react, alerted Roland of the creature's possible intentions to vault over the defenses. Carter, ever the valiant protector, positioned himself in front of Roland, poised to strike. Without hesitation, Axe drew his bow and let fly an arrow, piercing the beast's sinewy body in a lethal shot. As Roland surveyed the lifeless body of the beast, his inquisitive mind kicked into gear. The ebony hue of the creature's blood piqued his interest, and the realization that witches could withstand the aftermath of the awakening only deepened his fascination. His curiosity now stoked, he made a mental note to explore the enigmatic mountain in the near future. Roland turned to Axe and queried him about the consequences of being bitten by a demonic beast. To his relief, Axe assured him that death was the sole outcome, and not a ghastly transformation into a zombie-like fiend in some otherworldly ice sky. Roland's mind raced with a daring idea, consuming the flesh of the fallen beast. However, before he could vocalize his plan, Carter's voice boomed out, vehemently opposing Roland's suggestion. The thought of consuming infected meat was not just unappetizing, but also perilous to their survival. Axe supported Carter's warning with the grim fact that any hounds fed on the tainted meat would always die. Roland's heart sank at the realization of the opportunity lost, and he let out a wistful sigh. As the troops were conducting their regular patrols, a sudden report came in about an injured individual from the perilous North Slope mines. In a frenzy of activity, Roland made his way to the hospital where he was met with the sight of Manhwa, a young girl trembling with fear as she backed away from the wounded miner. Manhwa's father, a beacon of calm in the chaos, rushed to his daughter's side to offer solace and support. Drawing on her inner strength, Manhwa steeled herself and approached the injured man. With a deep breath, she summoned forth her latent ability, unleashing a blinding flash of light that left her father in awe. The injured man, now miraculously healed. Brian on the side also said it was Manhwa who saved his life, and showed his gratitude towards Manhwa. Moments later, the injured man slowly regained consciousness, his mind muddled with confusion and disbelief. He pondered whether what had just occurred was merely a vivid dream. Roland, ever the reassuring voice, assured him that it was indeed real and that he had been brought back from the brink of death by none other than the extraordinary Manhwa and her amazing ability. The man recoiled in shock at the mention of Manhwa's ability, and let out a gasp. "A witch! Aren't all witches demons?" Manhwa's father, bristling with anger at the man's words, sternly rebuked him. He reminded the man that it was Manhwa who had saved his life and that a demon would never deign to aid a human in such a manner. Realizing his grave mistake, the man sprang out of bed and fell to his knees, pleading for Manhwa's forgiveness. With tears streaming down his face, he expressed his deepest gratitude towards the young girl for saving his life. As Roland made his way back to his residence, he was met with the sight of Nightingale perched on his bed, her eyes glazed with concern. She feared that Manhwa's ability would be discovered and that the young girl would never be able to lead a normal life. Before Nightingale could say another word, Roland interjected with a sense of urgency in his voice. He reminded Nightingale that the border town was small and that the Holy Church's influence was limited. He believed that now was the perfect time to build trust in witches and that they needed to seize this opportunity before the dreaded month of the demon arrived. Roland was confident that if they could show the people that witches were not demons, they could slowly begin to break down the walls of fear and prejudice that had been erected against them. As Roland handed Nightingale a glass of wine, he spoke with confidence, assuring her that everything was under control. The heavy snow that covered the path leading to Chengdu's stronghold and the control they had over the shipping ports ensured that no news of the border town could reach the outside world. With 3 months, they had ample time to make a change. Roland reminded Nightingale of the miner who was saved by Manhwa earlier that day. The miner, once afraid of witch power, now believed that Manhwa was an angel of revival. Roland saw this as an opportunity to boost morale and plant a seed of change in people's hearts, especially in the new army he was building. Nightingale gazed at Roland with a loss for words. She stared at Roland's eye, feeling a bit fascinated, also with a mixture of curiosity and admiration, and couldn't help but ask him what was driving him to take such bold steps in support of the witches. Roland looked at her with a serious expression and spoke in a firm voice. "Because I believe that witches make the best waifu." Roland leaned forward, his eyes shining with determination. "Because I believe that everyone deserves a chance to live freely, hoping one day, even witches can live freely in his territory." Roland's speech had left Nightingale stunned, her eyes fixed on him in awe. After a long silence, she averted her gaze and began apologizing for the lies she had told him earlier. Nightingale explained that her fellow witches in the association had been wandering around for too long, and they simply wanted a safe place to stay, even if it was a castle like his. Roland was initially confused by her words, but then, as if a sudden realization had struck him, he understood that Nightingale was offering to bring the other witches to his castle. He felt a surge of excitement. Nightingale was in awe of Roland's grand vision for a world where everyone, including witches, could live together. However, she still had concerns about the repercussions of bringing the witches to the border town. He feared that this could potentially make Roland enemies with the church. Roland, on the other hand, remained calm and collected. He assured Nightingale that the church would not go to extreme lengths just to punish him. He knew that they wouldn't dare to provoke the royal family. As he walked towards the window, Roland emphasized the importance of starting small and building from there. He believed that they needed to start from the border town and gradually gather enough forces to take down the church. Eventually, Roland envisioned creating a kingdom where all people, regardless of their origins, could coexist in harmony. This was not just limited to Grey Castle, but the entire world. One day everyone will know that witches are truly the best waifu. Under the cover of darkness, a thundering of hooves echoed through the night as a group of mounted men thundered towards Grey Castle. Among them was a towering figure with a distinctive scar etched into his face, none other than Gerald Wimbledon, the first prince of the kingdom of Grey Castle. As they approached the castle gates, a sudden flare lit up the sky from within the walls. Undeterred, the first prince ordered his men to press forward and make their way inside. With a loud clanking, the chains holding the heavy castle doors began to descend, allowing the prince and his men to breach the castle's defenses. The air was thick with tension as the first prince drew closer to his ultimate goal, the throne of Grey Castle. As the first prince strode through the grand entrance, he was met with a respectful bow from a handful of ministers, eagerly awaiting his return. The prince acknowledged their greetings with a gracious smile, but wasted no time in getting to business. He inquired if the guards had been replaced as planned, to which the ministers hesitantly admitted that there had been some issues with the scheme. However, the prince remained unfazed, his unwavering confidence a testament to his unwavering determination. He issued orders to secure the entrance with all available personnel, keeping his trust in the 2 guards who would accompany him. As the first prince strode towards the king's residence, his thoughts were momentarily overtaken by fond memories of his childhood spent playing with his younger siblings. But a sudden glint of steely determination replaced his wistful expression as he approached the imposing doors. He knew he was about to break the king's rules and seize the throne by force. As he stood before the grand chamber, a faint odor caught his attention. The scent of blood hung in the air, an ominous omen of what was to come. His minister informed him that a maid was called in by the king and she had seen them switching the guards and that she had been dealt with accordingly. The first prince finds what the minister said to be extremely odd, as he knew his father hasn't touched a woman ever since his mother's passing. The first prince's resolve only hardened, knowing that there was no turning back now. With a deep breath, he pushed forward and entered the room. As the first prince pushed open the door, the metallic scent of blood assaulted his senses. His gaze swept across the room, settling on the bed where a gruesome sight awaited him. The sheets were soaked with crimson, evidence of a heinous crime committed within these very walls. Reacting on instinct, the first prince drew his sword with a sharp metallic ring, preparing for the worst. But what he saw next left him utterly bewildered. Standing beside the bed was his own brother, the second prince, and in the center of the room lay the king, a dagger piercing his chest, his lifeless eyes staring off into nothingness. Rage and confusion swirled within the first prince as he struggled to make sense of this horrific scene. His brother's hands were stained with blood, a damning sight that left no doubt as to who was responsible for this heinous act. The first prince's mind raced as he tried to come to terms with his brother's betrayal. He felt a seething anger deep within his chest, branding the second prince as a demon from the depths of hell. The second prince simply sneered in response, as if daring the first prince to judge him. He knew all too well that his brother had been provided with the same advantages he had, and that he too would have taken the same path if given the chance. Caught in a trap he never saw coming, the first prince struggled to regain his composure. He knew he was at a disadvantage, and that the second prince had planned this all along. But to his surprise, his brother revealed that he had no intention of killing him. The reason for his treachery was simple: he didn't want to wait 5 long years to face the third sister's powerful army. She had been building her forces long before the contest for the throne was even announced, and the second prince saw this as the perfect opportunity to take over Grey Castle without the need to build an army from scratch. With a fierce determination burning in his eyes, the first prince saw an opening and charged at his treacherous brother, intent on avenging their father's murder. But before he could get close, guards rushed in, their spears piercing deep into his flesh and bringing him down in a painful heap. The second prince stood over his fallen brother, a cruel smirk twisting his lips as he declared that the first prince would face trial the following day. Accused of leaving his own territory and assassinating the king, the first prince was helpless as he struggled against the guard's tight grip. He threatened to expose his brother's plot to the world, but the second prince merely chuckled, revealing a small vial of potion that would render anyone who drank it completely mute. The first prince's heart sank as he realized the depth of his brother's depravity. He had underestimated the second prince's cunning. With a twisted grin, the second prince declared that he would be returning to his territory that very night, intent on preparing for his ascension to the throne before news of their father's death could spread throughout the kingdom. His speech was filled with false sorrow and crocodile tears, but there was no mistaking the gleam of ambition in his eyes. As he spoke, the memories of their childhood flashed before the first prince's eyes, a bitter reminder of the happiness they had once shared. The sound of their laughter and the sight of them playing together felt like a distant dream, shattered like a mirror. As the first prince was dragged away, the minister approached the second prince, bowing his head in submission to the new king. The second prince assured him that their agreement would be upheld, but a sly grin twisted his features as he produced a small pill and handed it to the minister. The minister hesitated, sensing that something was amiss, but before he could protest, the second prince pressed the pill into his hand, coercing him to swallow it. With a shiver of fear, the minister realized that the pill would make him obedient to the new king, ensuring his loyalty and preventing any possible betrayal. As the other occupants vacated the chamber, the second prince approached the cold frigid cadaver of his father. His contorted visage betrayed the emotions within him, and a sudden recollection transported us back to the king's last moments. It was then that the second prince divulged his elder brother's return and his plot of desire for the throne, only to be met with a burst of chilling laughter and a shocking display of self-harm. Before the prince could fathom this confusion response, the king lunged at himself with a dagger, plunging it into his own chest. It was all so surreal, and the second prince couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. The prince had no time to react nor stop the suicide, yet a disconcerting sensation lingered in the back of his mind. Can't shake off the uneasy feeling of the entire situation.